Florida gained exactly 815 retirees last year. That's the entire net win for the biggest retirement magnet in the country. 45,696 people, 65 and older, moved into the state. 44,881 moved out. Put another way, out of every 100 retirees who packed up for Florida last year, about 98 packed up and left. For one retired couple outside Fort Myers, the reason showed up in an envelope: an insurance renewal pushing toward $4,000 a year on a house they had paid off, on which they had never once filed a claim. Multiply that by a few 100,000 fixed incomes and 815 stops, looking like a rounding error. It starts looking like an exit door slowly swinging shut. And one state in particular is catching more of the people walking through it than anywhere else in the country. For that couple, the number stopped being abstract on a Tuesday. The mail comes at 11. There is the usual stack, a grocery flyer, a card from a grandkid, and one envelope that is heavier than it should be, the kind that makes a retiree's stomach drop before they have even opened it, because they have learned what that particular weight means. Inside, the new number. Not a typo, not a one-time spike. The third increase in 3 years, stacked on top of the last two, on a house they bought in 2014 and paid off 6 years early. Specifically so they would never have a mortgage payment competing with a fixed income again. They did everything right. They budgeted, they paid it down early, they never filed a claim. And the number went up anyway, because in Florida right now, the number goes up even in a year when nothing at all happens to your house. That's the part the 815 figure hides. It isn't a story about weather, it's a story about a spreadsheet nobody in that couple's living room ever built, but that Florida's insurance market builds automatically, every single renewal cycle, no matter how far the nearest storm ever gets to their zip code. For a decade, their annual insurance number barely moved. Then, over 3 renewal cycles in a row, it didn't just rise, it reset. Multiple industry trackers put Florida's statewide average homeowners premium climbing from roughly $2,500 a year earlier this decade towards something closer to $4,500 by the middle of it, and coastal counties like theirs routinely sit above that average, not below it. Property tax bills moved right alongside it, as counties adjusted their own rates to cover rising rebuilding costs and their own insurance bills on public buildings. This doesn't show up as one dramatic headline. It shows up as a fixed income budget that used to balance and now doesn't, one renewal notice at a time. People didn't stop wanting Florida either, which is what makes the 815 number so strange. 45,000 new retirees still moved there last year, still one of the largest retiree inflows of any state in the country. The dream is still selling. What changed is that almost the same number moved out in the same 12 months, and when researchers who track moving records nationwide, using a database built from actual mover bookings rather than survey guesses, pulled the state-by-state numbers, Florida's net gain for people 65 and older barely cleared 4 digits. For comparison, that same research names one state that pulled in more net retirees last year than any other state in the country. Not Texas, not Arizona. South Carolina by a wide margin, and by the end of this video, you'll know exactly why. The number only means something if the method behind it holds up, so here is where it comes from. It comes from a company that processes moving bookings nationwide, tracking origin and destination on real household moves rather than survey responses or guesses, then sorting the ones involving a mover 65 or older. It is not a government census, so treat it as the best available read on the pattern, not gospel down to the last digit. The direction of the pattern, though, lines up with separate population data out of the University of Florida and with private housing migration trackers that watch net domestic migration state by state. Florida's overall inbound pace has cooled sharply from its pandemic-era peak, and South Carolina sits at the top of the list for where that traffic is landing. 3 independent sources pointing the same direction is a reasonable bar for this kind of migration data, especially in a niche where most videos just narrate a number without saying where it came from. This isn't a Florida-only story either, and that's exactly why it doesn't deserve to be shrugged off as one state's bad luck. The same insurance pressure is showing up across the whole Gulf and Atlantic coast, in Louisiana, in parts of Texas, in the Carolinas' own beachfront counties. What makes Florida the test case is scale. It has the largest population of retirees in the country living inside that exposure, so a small percentage shift in behavior turns into a visible dent in the migration numbers. The kind that shows up in a moving company's dataset instead of staying buried in a rate filing nobody reads. A state with a tenth of Florida's retiree population could see the same insurance spike and never register a blip on anyone's radar. Florida registers one, and 815 is what that blip looks like once you can see it. Before we get into exactly where these retirees are landing, one quick thing. If you're the kind of person who runs these numbers for your own life instead of trusting a headline, subscribe now, because this channel breaks down a different state-by-state cost comparison like this every few days, with fresh numbers, not a stale figure somebody's been recycling since 2022. You'll want to see the next one. Now back to the map. The real question isn't whether people are leaving Florida. Some are, some aren't, and the state's overall population is still growing on the strength of younger arrivals. The real question is where the retirees who leave land, and why 3 specific destinations keep showing up in the data over and over. The answer breaks into 3 states, and each one solves a different piece of the exact same math problem that couple outside Fort Myers is working through right now. Georgia is the first stop for a meaningful share of that outflow, and once you run the numbers, the poll isn't complicated at all. A retiree who's spent a decade in a Florida suburb can often find a nearly identical suburb an hour or 2 north, in a county like Cherokee or Forsyth outside Atlanta, where home prices land close to what they'd clear selling the Florida house. But the insurance quote comes back in the hundreds of dollars a year instead of the thousands. Further south, around Peachtree City, the same math holds with a smaller town feel instead of suburban sprawl, golf cart paths instead of 6-lane roads. Georgia also fully exempts a meaningful share of retirement income from state tax for residents 65 and older, on top of never touching Social Security at all, which keeps the overall tax picture close to what Florida offered, minus the same hurricane exposure driving the insurance bill through the roof. Atlanta also has more hospital capacity within an hour's drive than most of coastal Florida, which matters more every year a retiree ages in place. An uncomfortable thing to plan around, but a real one. The catch? Georgia isn't hurricane-proof either. Ice storms close roads for days at a time, some winters, and property tax rates vary hard county to county, so the same math that looks great in one Atlanta suburb can look completely ordinary 40 minutes away. Check the specific county before assuming the whole state behaves the same way, because it doesn't. 2 houses can sit on the same block, in the same school district, and carry a completely different insurance quote just because one has a metal roof and the other still has the original shingles from the 1990s. This move runs on that level of detail, not a statewide headline number. Tennessee draws a slightly different kind of retiree, one who picked Florida specifically for the no income tax structure and refuses to give that up on the way out, no matter what else changes. Tennessee offers the exact same deal, 0 state tax on retirement income, full stop, and pairs it with a cost of living that undercuts most of Florida's metro areas by a wide margin. A retiree earning a typical Florida retirement income can often find total monthly housing costs in a city like Knoxville running well below what the same budget covers in Tampa or Fort Myers, and the smaller city of Chattanooga, further south along the Tennessee River, tends to run even lower than Knoxville on the same comparison. That gap alone can cover a full year of the insurance increase that started this whole conversation, and it repeats every year. Both cities also sit far enough inland to avoid the direct hurricane insurance surcharge coastal Florida carries, which is the real driver of the savings, not the mountain views everyone assumes it is. It's a strange thing to realize that the biggest line item in a retirement budget can hinge less on the beauty of a view than on how far that view sits from open water. Nashville itself has gotten expensive enough that it no longer fits this math for most fixed incomes. But the counties ringing it, and the smaller cities further east, still do, for now. A retiree who priced out a Nashville condo 2 years ago and balked at the number would likely find the exact same square footage in Chattanooga for tens of thousands less. Insurance and taxes both included in that gap, not on top of it. The catch here is winters. They're mild by national standards, well short of anything the Midwest deals with, but they're not Florida. And for a retiree who left the Midwest specifically to never shovel snow again, that's a real trade-off to weigh before signing anything. Check winter road conditions in the specific county, not just the state average, because mountain counties and river valley counties do not behave the same way in January. South Carolina is the state absorbing the largest net number of retirees leaving Florida, more than 1,800 of them in the same year that research tracked, more than any other single destination on the list. South Carolina fully exempts Social Security from state tax and layers a retirement income deduction on top of that, so the tax picture rivals Florida's without asking a retiree to gamble on hurricane zone insurance rates the same way. The coast still carries real storm exposure. This video isn't going to pretend otherwise, and buyers right on the water there should expect insurance quotes closer to Florida's than to the rest of the state. But a few miles inland, in the corridor of smaller towns between Charleston and the North Carolina line, insurance quotes and property tax bills both come in meaningfully lower than the Florida coastal counties. Most of these movers are leaving behind, and even the coastal city of Myrtle Beach tends to run below comparable Florida beach towns on the same insurance comparison. The mechanism behind the numbers isn't a nicer beach or better weather. It's an insurance bill a fixed income can still carry, month after month, without a renewal notice undoing a decade of careful budgeting in one afternoon. If you already know a retiree who made this exact move out of Florida, drop the destination state in the comments right now, because the pattern in this data only gets sharper the more real examples sit next to it, and this channel reads everyone that comes in. Before anyone packs a truck, one caveat applies to all three of these states equally, and it's the part of this story that never makes the highlight reel. Mostly because it doesn't make for a very exciting thumbnail. None of them are cheap anymore either. Insurance costs are climbing nationwide, not just in Florida, and a retiree who moves chasing last year's rate could easily be chasing a number that's already changed by the time they close on a house. Property tax rates shift with local budgets every year, sometimes by a lot in one cycle, especially in fast-growing counties trying to fund new schools and roads. Crime rates, hospital closures, and drought or water supply pressure vary block by block in every one of these states the same way they do in Florida, so a good state-level number can still hide a bad specific address. And it's worth checking whether the nearest hospital to any target town is still open before signing anything, not just assuming it. Every one of these states still has its own version of Florida's problem waiting somewhere on the map. A coastal county, a booming suburb, an HOA with its own insurance crisis building behind the scenes, waiting for its own renewal notice moment. 10 years from now, someone could be making a video about retirees quietly leaving whichever county gets too popular too fast, using the exact same math this video is using right now, just with different state names attached to it. The right move isn't picking a state off a list like a menu. It's running the real numbers for the specific county, the same way that couple outside Fort Myers is doing right now, before deciding anything at all. There's also a cost to moving itself that this kind of comparison tends to conveniently skip. Selling a paid-off Florida house and buying again in any of these three states means closing costs, a new inspection, movers, and in most cases, a higher property tax bill for the first year or two, while the new county reassesses the purchase at its sale price instead of whatever the previous owner was paying for decades. That doesn't erase the insurance math. It just means the payoff isn't instant, and a retiree running these numbers should count on a year, sometimes two, before the move nets out ahead of staying put. For the couple outside Fort Myers, that's part of why they haven't packed a single box yet. The insurance bill is the trigger that started the conversation. The full math, moving costs included, is what decides it, and that math takes longer than one renewal notice to run. It's easy to see why the first year can feel like a wash, barely worth the hassle. It's the second year, when the old Florida premium would have renewed again and didn't, that the math finally clicks into place. There's one objection that comes up in almost every comment section under a video like this one, and it deserves a straight answer instead of a dodge. Isn't this just trading one disaster risk for another? Georgia gets ice storms and the occasional tornado outbreak. Tennessee sits close enough to the New Madrid fault line that earthquake coverage is its own line item on some policies there. South Carolina's coast faces the same hurricanes Florida does, just fewer of them making direct landfall in a given decade. None of these states is risk-free, and anyone telling a retiree otherwise is selling something. The difference isn't the presence of risk, it's the price of insuring against it. A Georgia ice storm closes a road for 2 or 3 days a year and rarely touches a roof. A Florida hurricane season reprices an entire coastline's insurance pool every year, storm or no storm, because insurers price the exposure, not just the event itself. The comparison isn't safe versus risky. It's a risk priced once every few years versus a risk repriced annually on a fixed income that doesn't get repriced at all. So here's a debatable question, and I want your real take in the comments, not just a reaction. If you had to bet your own retirement on one of these 3 states today, which one would you put your money on, and which one would you never touch? Say the state, and say why, and defend it. Florida's retirement math didn't collapse. It just stopped being the obvious answer it used to be, and the 815 number, 98 retirees walking back out for every 100 who walked in, is the clearest proof of that shift on record anywhere. The couple outside Fort Myers hasn't moved yet. They're still running the numbers on Georgia, Tennessee, and South Carolina against what staying costs them now, insurance renewal by insurance renewal, the same way you'd want to if this were your decision instead of theirs. The real version of this story isn't a state anyone's fleeing in a panic. It's a math problem thousands of fixed incomes are solving quietly, one renewal notice at a time, all across the country, news cameras or not. If this saved you from chasing the wrong state off a list, share it with the retiree in your life still convinced Florida is the only answer, because it might be the thing that saves them a very expensive mistake. Somewhere right now, another envelope is landing in another mailbox in another coastal county, and whoever opens it is about to become the next data point in next year's version of this same number. Whether that number keeps shrinking or finally turns around depends on renewal notices nobody's opened yet.